Damn, it's hot. I start regretting my decision as soon as we step foot outside. The harsh sunlight beats down on me without a moment's delay, and I start sweating like a pig. I half consider turning back around and abandoning this whole idea.
それでどこに行くの?
Some place to cool off, first of all. Why don't we go to the convenience store and get some ice cream? Oh, what do you want? Hanami Daifuku again? What happens to you in each, do you think? That's a good question. Yeah, okay. Here is the least nuanced way of my thought. This is the least nuanced way of my thought process in terms of each. In hell, you suffer eternal damnation. In purgatory, you basically nothing happens, right? Not in the way that you don't suffer, or you aren't like, how do I say this? Maybe okay, for me, in hell you suffer eternal damnation. In heaven, purgatory is just emptiness. Yeah, basically. Purgatory to me is basically the same way atheists imagine death. Right? Where after you die, there is nothing. That's my interpretation of purgatory. For heaven, well, I kind of have multiple, because I like the idea of reincarnation. I like the idea that when you die, it's kind of like this eternal bliss. There's a lot of depictions of heaven in comparison to hell and purgatory, and it's just an amalgamation of those kinds of things. I don't like that my memory gets lost, except for the fact that you wouldn't remember that you lived another life after you were reincarnated. Alright. But here's the thing, right? Reincarnation is the Buddhist interpretation of death, right? Not just heaven in general, because they don't have a concept of heaven or hell. They have reincarnation. And how you lived in life before you died determines what you become, what your next life is. Right? So, yeah. What about Earth then? What about Earth? Will Earth always exist? Well, no. Obviously not. Earth will eventually die out. If not from humans, then the sun expanding to the point where Earth is unsustainable to live on. So, you know, what do you think happens then? Well, by the time that happens, humans would probably be advanced enough in their civilization where they won't have to, where they're able to escape Earth, and instead of, like, you know, either they find a different star, they find a different star system where Earth basically, where there's basically an Earth 2.0, right? That's why there is a measurement, right? There is a measurement for planets that determines which one is the most Earth-like. Do you think humans will always exist in how we know it now, or do you think it will? Or do you think it depends? I think humans as a concept will exist, will continue to exist. Whether we look the same in, say, 10,000 years or a million years, who knows? There are a lot of interpretations of what humans will look like in a million years, especially from this book, I guess, called All Tomorrows, where essentially how it starts is okay, humans have lived for millions of years and have evolved to become different things. And then this infinitely more advanced civilization known as the Q come to see humans and hate them, and then force and then essentially morph humans into different things that would that is essentially used as a form of torture. It's hard to summarize Baltimore's because it's been a while since I've read anything about it. What do you think happens to pets according to how you think in afterlife and animals? What in the fact that some people think dogs don't go to heaven, and then and then all dogs go to heaven, right? What are you asking? What my stance is on that? All animals except for the ones. Listen, it's the same as humans, but it's like okay, most animals probably would go to heaven, except for ones where there's always going to be a rotten apple in the bunch, even if even for the animals that aren't trained into be essentially evil, right? I mean, most of the time, it's always yeah, they're probably going to go to heaven. All dogs, all pets, all animals in general, I guess, because in terms of animals, they don't really have a moral compass. They're just following instincts. Do you think aliens exist? And if they do you think that they would be bound by the same afterlife? Good question. If aliens existed and if they died, if they have if they abide by the same moral compass that humans do, then I think yeah, they would.
ういや、今日は別のアイスにしておくよ。
Or do you think it's a separate but same afterlife? Maybe separate. Maybe same. Who knows?
花見大福も美味しいけど、外で食べるなら他のアイスにしておきたい。
Yeah, popsicles are the best on hot days. At the end of the day, Dexter, at the end of the day, the reason why people believe in heaven is because it's used as a coping mechanism for when their loved ones die. And believing that they live in heaven is a better way of thinking than if you just thought that they died and they will live in purgatory forever or whatever. If the animals and humans meet wanting to stay together romantically, you think it would be allowed? What? I'll go with a crunchy ice cream. They're great when it's hot out. When it's hot out, you just gotta make sure to eat it before it melts and falls on the ground.
ザクザクさんか。それもとても魅力的だけど。これは。
Not aliens, not animals. Yeah, I said that. if aliens and humans meet wanting to stay together romantically, do you think it would be allowed in the afterlife? Now, here's the thing. There is another interpretation of the afterlife where it is essentially it states that in the afterlife, all forms of desire cease to exist. Right? Now, the idea of that sounds depressing as fuck, but there are some people who interpret it. There are some people who interpret heaven as having that kind of ability or that kind of system because, right, a lot of times human desire is what leads to sin, committing a lot of it leads to people it leads to sin, right? Essentially.
リク、ザクザクさんはちょっと待った。僕にいい考えがある。
Oh boy, what is it? It's the background. It's the park with the seemingly with the characters that are definitely not from other Ubisoft games in the background. Wanting to avoid walking on the burning hot asphalt, we head to the park instead. After wiping the sweat off her brow under the shade of a tree, she pulls out the popsicle we bought.
はい。
Hang on.
バックログ画面だ。
That's not a popsicle. I don't know what it's called, but that's not... I don't think people call that a popsicle. If heaven exists, I would want to be able to be with a fictional anime lolly romantically, even if it's like a simulation. IDK, it's complicated for me. Okay, well, then you're going with the American Dad approach, where in American Dad, one of their interpretations of heaven is that in okay, let me be specific. In the episode where the rapture happens, their interpretation of heaven is that every human who goes to heaven is given is assigned a room, and in that room and that room is where all of your desires exist, or something or the other, right? So in that interpretation, your room would have your favorite anime lolly in it, and you'd be able to do whatever or something. He splits the tube in half and presents me with one of them. Thanks. I take it.
これはこうやって二人で分け合って食べるものなんだろ？
Well, you don't have to. I usually eat both when I get it.
アマネと分け合ったりはしないの？
Not really. Maybe we did when we were younger. There's not much reason for now. Oh, not much reason to now. We'll just put what we don't have finished in the fridge. For the other to have whenever. The way she's focusing so much on the sharing aspect makes this feel almost romantic in a sense. That interpretation, what if you wanted to be the person you loved wanted to be with the person you loved on Earth? Would it be the real person, or that person? Would it be the real person if that person wanted that too? Well, considering that this interpretation of heaven was in the same episode where the rapture happens, yes, it would. But if said person was still alive when you died and you went to heaven, I don't think it would not be the same person. Right? Because okay, here's the problem. Here's the problem. Would it be a real person or fake? Or would you even know? Good question. Here's the thing. Here's the problem. Here's the big problem. The concept of heaven, hell, purgatory is so nonsensical in the sense that how could there be a place that you go to after you die where someone who has not lived a good life has to face eternal damnation, someone who has not lived a good life, but not to the point where they have to suffer as much as the other person has to live a life of nothingness, and then eternal suffering just sounds cruel to me. Well, maybe you shouldn't have killed those 3 people. Then you wouldn't have gone to hell. and then someone who's lived a good life gets to live out their wildest fantasies. Right? Who knows? Maybe the only reason these places exist is because when any human dies, they dream about they dream about, you know, something or the other. Right? If they lived a good life, they dream about their version of heaven. And when someone who's lived a bad life dies, their guilty conscience makes them dream about hell, right? Something or the other, you know? Because understand that the place of heaven or hell does not exist. Because, well, maybe it does, but where would it exist? Maybe the idea of heaven and hell relates back to the theory that your consciousness is detached from your real body. You're attached from this body, right? And your real consciousness is floating in the air somewhere, right? And will be dragged down to hell or taken up into heaven when you die or whatever, right? We just, you know, we're just floating in a sea of consciousness. Do you think human souls exist? Physically, no. But metaphorically, yes. Even though all we're doing is sharing a popsicle, I could feel my heart rate rising. To distract myself from the embarrassment, I pull on the little plastic top of the tube and pry it open. What does that mean? What do you mean, what does that mean? If it existed physically, where would it be? Right? That's why I'm saying the human soul would exist metaphorically. Metaphorically exist. In the same way that your consciousness exists metaphorically. Right? You can't pry open someone's brain and find their consciousness. Right? That's not how it works. So then, where would it be if it exists physically? Is the brain your consciousness? Then in the same vein, your heart would then in the same vein, my heart would be my soul, something. So it is a physical soul, but it's just that we can't see it. No, because a person's consciousness does not exist physically. It only exists metaphorically. Right? You can't find someone's consciousness. That's why people have used that interpretation, have used Do you think that souls actually wander on Earth? As in ghosts? Maybe. Who knows? Mimicking my emotions, Noah opens hers and brings the tip of it to her mouth. Is it because it's cold? You can squeeze and eat it as it pushes up. I also bite around the tip to get the ice cream out. If all you do is suck, your mouth's gonna get sore fast. Wouldn't purgatory be like a lost soul or something? I mean, I've thought of that interpretation, where if ghosts are real, then those ghosts would be in purgatory, right? Until the soul feels at peace or something. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of fiction that has used that interpretation, where the ghosts on Earth are only there because they haven't found peace or whatever. The summer heat must be making it easier to eat. Her eyes sparkle with joy as she informs me. It's been a while since I've had one of these myself. The crunchy texture of it is really nice. Of it really is nice. Man, this takes me back. Isn't there a thing where ghosts exist, but they can't let go of something on Earth? Getting into some deep discussions. Listen, this all started because of angels and shit. So, you know, not really. I mean, I like them, but it's been a while since I've gone out of my way to buy one. I don't commute to school by train, so I rarely ever stop to get treats on the way back. Going to the convenience store basically requires me to make a detour. I've talked more about fucking heaven than actually playing the game. Yeah, they're easy to eat, and they're nice and cold. Here we are, sitting under the shade of a big tree, eating popsicles as we watch the sunlight reflect off the grass. But it's still incredibly hot. There are a few people walking around the park, but no kids playing at all. The only sounds we hear are the wind blowing and each other as we eat. It's making me feel a bit awkward. As thoughts race through my mind, I eat my popsicle a little more slowly than quietly. Sorry for dragging you outside in this heat. Hmm? Okay, this all started because Noah's an angel, and the Valkyrie is Noah, and then we talked about angels, and then I started talking about the Big Bang, and the fact that if the Big Bang exists, how did it come to be? And so we brought up Christianity because one interpretation of it is that God was the one who created the Big Bang. But then I'm like, then if God how does God exist, right? What happened before God? You know? And then we expanded on that in terms of and started talking about heaven and hell and purgatory, and then I talked about Wendigoon because he has he has three videos summarizing the Divine Comedy / Dante's Inferno, Purgatorio, Paradiso, and then we brought up how my interpretation of hell, purgatory, and heaven is, and then we started talking about the soul and consciousness. So, you know, deep shit. Was it that obvious?
君らしくなかった。この暑い中に外に出るなんてところは特に。
Yeah, I always complain about it. I'd take a deep breath, gather my thoughts, and redirect my attention to her. There's something that's been bothering me. The dream I had last night was more or less as I explained, except for one thing I didn't tell you. The Valkyrie I saw had the same face as you. Not like a sister or mother type of resemblance. You looked similar. You looked so similar, it felt strange. You looked so similar, it felt like I was staring at you. I'm guessing that's not a coincidence. I mean, I'm glad they haven't dragged this out that much. So, you know, it's not that big of a spoiler when I ask Dexter to just rip the band-aid off and tell me if the Valkyrie is Noah. So, are you...
まさか笑うことになるなんて自分でも驚きだ。最後を飾る言葉を考えてたのに、こんなことしか言えないなんて様にならない。魔王が最後に言ったのはこんなことだったはずだ。
So you really are the Valkyrie? But like, I believe you, of course. But why are you so young? The woman I saw in my dream was a grown adult.
僕は一度死んだんだ。そして天使に生まれ変わった。
Finally, music. We've only heard the fucking screaming of cicadas in the background.
魔王が異世界の人間に生まれ変わったのと同じようにね。
You were the Valkyrie in your previous life?
その通りだ。僕は天使になる前、異世界のネーベ大陸に生まれた人族の女の子だった。
Ah. Right. Interesting. So,
でもまさか戦乙女なんて恥ずかしい呼ばれ方をしているなんて思わなかったよ。
Okay, yeah, I was right in thinking that Valkyrie was only was only a title that the humans gave her after she killed Diablo. I also read online that in Christianity, and when you go to heaven, you wouldn't be with the person you married and loved a lot on Earth. If you did, and it would be essentially replaced with only God. Excuse me? Okay. The thing about what comes after death is that nobody knows for sure because everybody who does know is dead. It's okay to wonder about it, but just know that there's no way to know for sure. I personally wouldn't think too hard on it. True, that's also a good thought process. But here's another interpretation that people have had on heaven/hell. So this is a weird interpretation, right? It requires a bit of thinking, but essentially how some people have interpreted heaven and hell is that heaven and hell and purgatory in the same vein exist at the same point in time, right? And what I'm saying is, and what I mean by that is that everything that has happened in the past and everything that will happen in the future exists at the same point in heaven and hell. So, in what I'm interpreting as to what you're saying in that comment is that, hang on, let me read it again. I also read online that in Christianity, and when you go to heaven, you wouldn't be with the person you married and loved a lot on earth. If you did, it would be essentially replaced with only God. Okay, what I was trying to interpret by what you're saying is that the husband, you die, but your wife is still alive. Right? Either way, the way the interpretation of everything in heaven and hell exists at the same point is that you die, you go to heaven, but your wife is also there, but died at a different point in time, right? But because everything that will happen, or also everything that will happen exists at the same point in heaven, then all of your loved ones who are still alive would be in heaven, right? Something like that. I mean, it's an interesting take, because okay, here's the problem, and it has nothing to do with the interpretation, with that interpretation, but the reason I don't like the reason I don't like it is because there is a movie and its sequel known as R.I.P.D. And essentially what this movie is that Ryan Reynolds, the main character of R.I.P.D., dies and basically becomes a cop for heaven to fight against demons that escaped hell and are on Earth or whatever, right? They use that interpretation in that movie of heaven existing at a single point. So it's determined if I'm going to heaven or hell. That's confusing, right? I mean, you know, you could think of it as there are two versions of you that exist simultaneously in heaven and hell, and the version of you that you take over through your consciousness is the one that best suits how you lived your life, essentially. Right? So if you've been a good boy, your consciousness will go to the version of you in heaven, and then I don't think that everyone is innately good and evil. Well, no, everyone is innately good. But how would that explain purgatory? Right. That's also a good question. But that's the thing, though, right? Is that it's a weird way to think about purgatory existing in one point, because if you are a ghost on Earth, you are in purgatory, but if purgatory exists at the same point, obviously everyone who sees you is in you for the first time in their present. But what would be the ghost's present if there is no past and future? Right? Who knows? Right. I remember Kaguya saying something along those lines. Okay, Kaguya hasn't said anything like I just said. Alright. I'm spouting bullshit here. How the Valkyrie disappeared after killing Diablo, and no one knows where she came from or who she was. What happened?
寿命だよ。魔王を撃ってからほどなくして僕は死んだんだ。
Are ghosts just a glitch in the simulation? Ghosts? Okay, if we're doing simulation theory right now, ghosts would be the ghosts would be code that they didn't patch out. Right? What? Yeah, I don't know either, Riku. She didn't look that old.
君が夢で見た戦乙女の姿、何歳に見えた？
What? Maybe early to mid 20s?
あの時の僕は生まれてから4年か5年、その程度だったと思う。
Okay, so you were a weird human. What?
僕はね、魔法技術によって作られたんだ。
So you weren't even human?
いや、僕の前世である戦乙女か。
Do you think the simulation theory could actually exist? And if so, do you think that we would wake up as ourselves in real life if it's a VR thing? Except that if it's a VR thing, then it's not a simulation, because then your body would exist in the real world. That's Matrix shit. All right, the Matrix is not the Matrix is not simulation theory. The simulation theory is that you exist in a computer. All right, there is no real version of you out in the real world. Right? I mean, I guess you could say that's one interpretation, but I don't think that's what most people would think of when they think of simulation theory. But I never watched the Matrix movies. Okay, but what is the Matrix? The Matrix is a simulation, right? To boil it down to the basic terms, right? The Matrix is basically a simulation, as we're talking about, but everyone in the Matrix exists in the real world, right? And they're overseen by some fucking alien thing or whatever. I haven't seen the Matrix in a while. It's been a while. I haven't seen the Matrix in a bit, especially because, well, it's only the first Matrix that's really good. The others kind of fall off. I mean, you know. But the reason I like Neil deGrasse Tyson's interpretation of simulation theory is because, I mean, it makes sense, right? There is a 50% chance that we are either the first simulation or we are the last simulation. Simulations exist and God exists at the same time. How would that work? How would we be categorized as humans? Here's why. This is why I don't believe in simulation theory, because it doesn't work in physics. There is no physical way for you to be able to create a simulation like Earth, because if you have created you as the first humans have as the only humans have created a simulation that is the exact same thing as everything that happened in the first world, right? But in that second world, what do you think is going to happen? They're also going to create a simulation, and then that world creates a simulation. That world creates a simulation. Essentially, how the fuck does the first world have enough power, enough energy to sustain the second world, or the third, or the fourth, or the, you know? So, right, we either are the first world, or we are the only other world. Wouldn't the second simulation just not work? No, what I'm saying is that if we as humans have, or we as humans who are in a simulation were created in the same way as the humans in the first world, we would also create a simulation. But the problem with that is now that the first world has to have essentially infinite amount of energy at that point to sustain every single other simulation. But if there is only one simulation, there is you could sustain that with a finite amount of energy, because even if it takes billions of trillions of years in this simulation, it will eventually, everything in this simulation will eventually die, right? Here's why it's confusing. Here's why I don't believe in the simulation theory. And it's not because the amount of energy it would take to do all of this is incomprehensible. It's incomprehensible because no one in our world today has created anything similar to a simulation that is so real that we are unable to distinguish it between this world and the world in the computer, right? That's not why I don't think the simulation theory isn't true. The reason why I don't think it's true is because of the fact that we are thinking about this, right? The fact that we as humans have thought of the fact that we live in a simulation means that we as humans are also capable of creating our own simulation in time. So, of course, that would mean that the humans in the first world would need to provide the second world enough power to create their own simulation. And then the humans in the second world would need to create enough power for the humans in the third world to create their own simulation, and then so on and so forth. Like a fucking daisy chain kind of thing, where now, the first world doesn't have enough power. And so neither does the second world, and neither does the third, or the fourth, or the fifth, right? So it just, you know, it doesn't make sense at the beginning, right? If we do make a simulation and God exists, would he start putting people in the simulation in heaven or hell when they die? Well, that's the thing. We would become gods of that simulation. We become the gods of that simulation, right? That's the thing. You were created.
母親のお腹の中にいる段階から様々な魔法による実験を受けたんだ。意図的に強化するために。
Get much past billions of trillions of years and you start to approach the death of the universe. True. Isn't creating life as humans other than through natural sex like taboo? Yes, it is. But that was, you know, that was old-timey. That was old-timey think, right? The humans far into the future with the technology to create a simulation would be far beyond the thought process of thinking that creating human life in a simulation is taboo. Or are you talking about Noah? Because here's the thing, we haven't said anything about angelic chaos except at the start, because you, as the fucking only chatter before Byte came in, has talked about anything other than Noah. You have, this is the first time it's been relevant to angelic chaos because we're talking about religion, but it doesn't change the fact that this has nothing to do with angelic chaos.
こちらで言うならデザイナーチャイルドだっけ。この前漫画で読んだけど。
This is uncharacteristic of me, isn't it? No. What is uncharacteristic is that you're talking about something that relates to angelic chaos. Right? The characteristic thing of you is to not talk about the game we're playing. Alright, that's the characteristic thing. The uncharacteristic thing is you talking about something that is actually relevant to angelic chaos. Even slightly. Even if it's ever so slightly relevant. Because I don't think they're going to be talking about heaven and hell in fucking angelic chaos. I don't think they've talked about God in angelic chaos. The only reason angelic chaos is even in the name is because of Noah, who used to be human. Quote unquote human. Now that we don't even know if she's human. Was human.
戦乙女の場合、強大なマナをその身に宿すよう強化が行われたんだ。
You can do that much. You can do that with magic. Wait, why did she look so old?
操作されたものだよ。一日でも早く戦場に出せるように。
Going from lollies to metaphysics. Yeah, we're talking about philosophical shit here. Is that even like legal in that world?
まさか。あちらでも禁忌とされる行為だし、露見すればそしりを免れない。戦乙女の出自も経歴も不明とされているのは、知られればただでは済まないからだよ。
So, is that why she died when she did? When she did?
人族ではありえないマナを宿した影響か、強制的に成長させた反動か。どちらにしても実験は失敗だったんだ。壊れた道具に価値なんてない。魔王と戦ってからほどなく戦乙女は死んだ。そして天使になった。
But why an angel? Is that normal?
どうだろう。僕もその理由は知らないけど、不憫に思って拾われたのかもしれないね。
But who's they? You haven't mentioned God in any sort of way. Who's that? Thank you, Riku.
天にいわゆる神様。
I just needed to bitch and moan a bit more and I would have got my answer. Also, thanks Chatarino for telling me I'm live. And then now I'm offline again.
実験の影響は肉体だけじゃなかったんだ。マナの影響はその人の根源に及ぶ。実験によって根源まで傷を負った僕は生まれ変わることもできずに消滅してしまうはずだった。
That was a lot more than I expected. I would have thought Noah would have contact with God or someone that serves God or talks to someone that serves God directly. Or talks to someone that serves God directly. You're thinking of My Klutzy Cupid. Hence why you said you were saved. So does that mean you came down here to figure out why Diablo was smiling?
魔王とリクは別人だ。天使としての使命を下されたことに偽りはない。リクを守ることが僕がここにいる理由だ。
Okay, now we can get into what Angelic Chaos's interpretation of heaven is. In what Ubisoft's interpretation of heaven is in this game. Because, right, Noah died around the same time Diablo did. But why is Noah here now and not when Riku was younger? Right? Because she, as an angel, existed way before Riku did, right? Or am I misinterpreting? Here's the thing. I don't know how long it's been since Diablo died and Riku was born. Right? Maybe it's 2,000 years like in MML, in Magical Marriage Lunatics, where Yuta's ancestor from 2,000 years ago wanted to fuck a vampire queen from 2,000 years ago, and they weren't able to do it until 2,000 years later, where they ruined the story. Never mind.
ただ、なんというか、魔王が笑うなんてこと考えもしなかったんだ。戦乙女は残虐、非情、冷酷、無慈悲、人族を滅ぼそうとしている魔王を一日でも早く撃たなければならない。そんな風に刷り込まれていたからね。
But don't angels have some sort of contact with God unless it's indirect? Not unless, even if it's indirect. Well, Dexter, you can find out more about angels if you watch the Wendigoon video on his explanation of the 9 angels. Well, they certainly gave him a bad rap. Kaguya's telling of the events never painted him as this embodiment of evil, hell-bent on destroying the world. I was referring to Noah in this game. Well, you're talking about angels, so, you know, that doesn't seem to be bias either. From Noah's tone, I can sense that she realizes he wasn't that bad either.
でも実際、戦場で対峙する魔王は恐ろしい存在だったよ。それだけの力を有していたからね。
So, is it because Noah became an angel that she remembers everything that Valkyrie did? I mentioned Noah before that. Well, yeah, but you aren't referring to... But... When you're talking about angels having contact with God, you aren't saying Noah. You're saying angels. You're using the entire concept of angels as the generalization. I did. You referred to Noah before that.
バックログ画面だ。なのにそれを見たときに、
Okay, this is your fault.
ようやく疑問を持つことができた。
Where's the fucking log?
バックログ画面だ。なのに最後は笑ったんだ。まるで親しい人と世間話でもするみたいな調子で穏やかに。それを見たときにようやく疑問を持つことができた。
Thanks for the hydrate.
後悔とは少し違うかな。
End the stretch.
争いが終わったことで救えた命はたくさんある。その中には魔族の命も含まれる。だから
Yeah,
悔いたりしない。
but is it really a good thing if the bad guys were the winners? Right? If Noah is saying that she as Valkyrie was forced to believe that Diablo was a bad guy, then doesn't that mean that the humans were the bad guys in the war? But then the war, you know, the war ended up with the humans winning. So, you know, does that mean the bad guys won?
でも魔王は違う。恨んで当然だ。憎悪を抱いて当然だった。なのに笑ったんだ。
Maybe it's because he was killed by a cute girl.
それを見た戦乙女は疑問を持った。自分がしたことは一体何だったのか。 魔王を撃つ必要は本当にあったのか。もしそんな必要がなかったとしたら、人体実験までされて生まれた戦乙女は何のために生まれたんだろう。
And those questions haven't gone away?
だからね、さっきも言った通りだ。今さら魔王の命を狙ってるなんてことはない。
No, she doesn't have a desire to take Diablo's life again, but she does have a desire to fuck his descendant, Noah.
変な話を聞かせたね。誠に申し訳ない。
It's fine. I wanted clarity about that dream. For my own reasons, too. I can't get over how he felt so content during his death. What was he thinking? Why was he smiling?
リク、
I mean, it doesn't... I mean, it doesn't make much sense. Since the last situation you'd expect someone to be happy in. That's the last situation you'd expect someone to be happy in. But he was smiling genuinely. That had to mean he wasn't afraid of dying. It was fine. It was a fine outcome in his mind.
そんなこと。
It's possible. Why deny it? Go back to what you said. What you just said. Countless lives were saved by the war ending, and demons among them. Didn't you just finish MML? Yes. What do you mean? I literally just uploaded Kakanuke today. Maybe he realized that and felt joy. Of course, I don't know his true thought process at that time. I can choose the optimistic interpretation or the pessimistic one, but there's no way to know either way. Kakanuke, yeah, Dexter, don't you remember? Don't you remember that I literally said at the end of Kakanuke's All Ages route that I would play that after I finished Magical Marriage Lunatics? We posted Kakanuke today. It's not on Patreon. Dexter, why would it be on Patreon when the VODs have been up since 2024? Hmm? You've already seen me play Kakanuke for the H scenes. Okay. You understand that I'm not going to post the Dexter, you understand that I have to post the VODs first on my main channel. Not the full VODs, just the, cut down to however long I have them usually on my main channel. The hate scenes come after. You're not uploading the stuff you played up. You're uploading the stuff you played of Kakanuke recently. Not correct. I don't think the first episode is gonna have a hate scene. True. I'm uploading all of what I've already played on my main channel, right? You can watch it on my main channel. You can watch me play Kakanuke on my main channel, or you can watch through all of the VODs, right? On my VOD channel, if you want. It's gonna be the same. Thanks for subscribing with Prime. It's gonna be the same with Angelic Chaos, right? After I finish 9-9, I'm gonna be posting Angelic Chaos plus the hate scenes. But with in regards to Angelic Chaos, right? The hate scenes will be separate on the Prime on Patreon.
そうかもね。リクの言う通りだ。もし魔王が遺恨を残していたとしたら、あんな風に笑うことはなかっただろうね。バックログ画面だ。
I could choose the optimistic interpretation or the pessimistic one, but there's no way to know either way. Yeah, okay. I see. Well, yeah. You're a founder because the way the founder badges work is that the streamer becomes an affiliate, right? That gives the chatters the ability to subscribe. Only a certain amount gets the founder's badge, right? How many founders badges are left? I don't know. I don't know where to find them. Yeah. And then it's like, after a certain amount of subscribers or followers or whatever, then you get more founders badges after. It's why I didn't have a founder's badge when I first subscribed to Smugglerana, but now I do. I was the first founder, right? Yes. Well, no. Pontus was. But, you know, he was a friend, so it doesn't count. Technically, you were. You're the... Pontus is not a regular. He's just a friend. Same way Moose isn't a regular. He's just a friend that uses his prime on me whenever he remembers to.
魔王にとっても喜ばしいことか。そうなのかもしれないね。
She's smiling right now, but there's something somber about it. It almost seems like she's doing it to reassure me, and maybe even herself. Seeing that sad smile hurts me. What do I even say at a time like this? I feel a myriad of emotions. I'm definitely thankful to her, and I feel like there are so many things I could and should say. But I can't think of anything, as all I feel is anguish and shame over my inability to alleviate her fears. I brace myself for the scorching sun and get up. Once exiting the shade, I extend my hand towards her. It's way too hot. We'll end up fainting if we stay out here too long. Shall we go home? Go back home? She slowly places her hand atop mine, or was about to. Right before our hands touch, she stops. Her hand stays there, evincing the doubt in her heart. Come on. Impatient, I go ahead and take her hand. It doesn't quite feel like we're holding hands. There's too much of an element of force. Grabbing her dainty hand, I pull her up and out of the shade. After reacting with surprise at first, the relenting sunlight illuminates a smile on her face.
そうだね。帰ろう。やっぱり外は暑いからね。